The 1970s produced some of cinema's most controversial and unflinching war films, but many were buried by studios uncomfortable with their anti-war messages and brutal honesty. These 10 forgotten masterpieces challenged audiences with realistic portrayals of combat trauma, government corruption, and the true cost of warfare that Hollywood preferred to keep hidden. 10. Go Tell the Spartans, 1978. Burt Lancaster delivers one of his finest late-career performances as Major Asa Barker, an aging military advisor in 1964 South Vietnam before America's full involvement. The film's prophetic warnings about the futility of the coming war made studios nervous about distribution during the ongoing conflict's aftermath. Director Ted Post creates authentic atmosphere through practical Vietnamese locations and realistic military equipment. Lancaster's weathered performance captures a career soldier's growing disillusionment as he witnesses young American advisors dying for unclear objectives in an unwinnable situation. The screenplay, based on Daniel Ford's novel Incident at Muk Wah, explores themes about military honor, political manipulation, and the tragic waste of human life. The film's intimate scale focuses on character development rather than spectacular battle sequences. United Artists limited the theatrical release, fearing audiences weren't ready for more Vietnam content after recent box office disappointments. The film's accurate prediction of America's military failure in Southeast Asia proved too uncomfortable for mainstream distribution, despite Lancaster's committed performance and authentic portrayal of early American involvement. 9. The Boys in Company C, 1978. Sidney J. Fury's Vietnam combat drama follows Marine recruits from boot camp through their disastrous deployment, exposing military incompetence and political corruption that studios found too controversial for wide release. The film's unflinching portrayal of American failure in Vietnam challenged official narratives. Stan Shaw, Andrew Stevens, and James Whitmore Jr. deliver authentic performances as young Marines, discovering that their real enemies include their own commanding officers and government policies. The ensemble cast creates believable bonds formed under extreme pressure. The film exposes drug abuse, racial tensions, and morale collapse within American forces while critiquing military leadership that prioritized body counts over strategic objectives. Fury's direction balances brutal combat sequences with sharp political commentary. The film's honest examination of how institutional racism and class warfare undermined military effectiveness remains powerfully relevant, proving that suppressed war films often contain the most important truths about conflict. 8. Who'll Stop the Rain, 1978. Carol Rice's Vietnam aftermath thriller stars Nick Nolte as a war correspondent smuggling heroin from Southeast Asia, exposing government drug trade connections that made studios extremely nervous about distribution. The film reveals how the war corrupted everyone it touched. Based on Robert Stone's novel Dog Soldiers, the story follows Nolte's John Converse as he attempts to transport drugs through a network of corrupt officials and dangerous criminals. Tuesday Weld and Michael Moriarty provide strong supporting performances in this paranoid thriller. The film's exploration of government complicity in drug trafficking and veteran exploitation challenged official narratives about American involvement in Southeast Asia. Rice creates authentic atmosphere of post-war paranoia and moral corruption that permeated American society. The film's prescient warnings about the lasting damage caused by military conflicts and government secrecy remain disturbingly relevant, demonstrating why studios preferred to bury uncomfortable truths about America's military adventures rather than confront their moral implications. 7. Coming Home, 1978. Hal Ashby's intimate drama about a paralyzed veteran's relationship with an officer's wife challenged conservative audiences with its anti-war message and graphic depiction of veteran suffering. Studios worried about alienating military audiences and conservative viewers. Jon Voight delivers a powerhouse performance as Luke Martin, a wheelchair-bound veteran whose romance with Sally Hyde, Jane Fonda, transforms both characters' understanding of love, war, and sacrifice. Bruce Dern completes the triangle as Sally's conflicted military husband. The film's explicit scenes and frank discussion of sexual dysfunction among wounded veterans created controversy among United Artists initially worried about the film's commercial prospects, given its challenging subject matter and political themes. The movie's condemnation of the Vietnam War and celebration of anti-war activism made studio executives nervous about potential backlash. Despite eventual Academy Award success, the film faced significant resistance from military communities and conservative critics who objected to its portrayal of disabled veterans and criticism of American foreign policy. Coming Home's honest examination of war's human cost remains powerfully moving and politically challenging. 6. The Deer Hunter, 1978. Michael Cimino's epic Vietnam drama faced studio pressure to cut its controversial Russian roulette sequences and tone down its brutal depiction of war's psychological damage. Universal worried about the film's length and disturbing content affecting commercial prospects. Robert De Niro, Christopher Walken, and John Savage deliver career-defining performances as Pennsylvania steelworkers whose friendship is destroyed by combat trauma. The film's three-act structure explores how war permanently changes ordinary people. The movie's depiction of North Vietnamese brutality and American prisoner torture created controversy among critics who accused Cimino of racist stereotyping. The extended wedding sequence and hunting scenes were deemed too long by nervous studio executives. The film's ultimate success proved that audiences were ready for serious examination of war trauma, but studio resistance nearly prevented its release in Cimino's intended form. The Deer Hunter's unflinching portrayal of psychological damage remains one of cinema's most powerful anti-war statements. 5. Rolling Thunder, 1977. Paul Schrader's revenge thriller about a returned POW's violent readjustment to civilian life proved too dark and politically complex for mainstream distribution. The film's exploration of veteran trauma and institutional failure challenged comfortable narratives about heroic homecomings. William Devane delivers a chilling performance as Major Charles Rain, whose torture in Vietnamese prison camps has left him emotionally dead and capable of extraordinary violence. Tommy Lee Jones provides strong support as a fellow veteran joining Ronnie's quest for revenge. The film's graphic torture sequences and nihilistic worldview disturbed studio executives who preferred more uplifting veteran stories. Schrader's script explores how institutional abandonment and social indifference drive damaged veterans toward violence. The film's influence on later vigilante movies and its honest examination of PTSD demonstrate why studios preferred to suppress uncomfortable truths about veteran experiences rather than confront society's failure to address combat trauma effectively. 4. Apocalypse Now, 1979. Francis Ford Coppola's hallucinogenic Vietnam epic faced massive studio interference as United Artists worried about its budget overruns, controversial content, and challenging narrative structure. The film's critique of American imperialism made executives extremely nervous. Martin Sheen's journey upriver to eliminate rogue Colonel Kurtz, Marlon Brando, becomes a descent into moral darkness that exposes the war's fundamental corruption. The ensemble cast includes Robert Duvall's iconic helicopter commander and Dennis Hopper's unhinged photojournalist. The film's production became legendary for its chaos, with Coppola nearly suffering nervous breakdown while creating his vision of warfare as collective madness. The movie's surreal imagery and philosophical themes challenged conventional war movie expectations. The film's eventual success proved that audiences were ready for complex, challenging war cinema, but studio resistance nearly prevented its completion. Apocalypse Now's anti-imperialist message and psychedelic approach to combat remain unmatched in their power and originality. 3. Soldier Blue, 1970. Ralph Nelson's cavalry western exposed American military atrocities against Native Americans with graphic violence that horrified studio executives and military censors. The film's parallels to contemporary Vietnam massacres proved too controversial for wide distribution. Candice Bergen and Peter Strauss star as survivors of a Cheyenne attack who witnessed the Sand Creek Massacre, depicted with unprecedented brutality for Hollywood cinema. The film's graphic violence was intended to shock audiences into confronting historical truth. The movie's explicit condemnation of American military tactics and systematic genocide challenged comfortable Western mythology. Nelson's direction emphasizes the horror of institutionalized violence rather than heroic frontier adventure. The film's limited release and subsequent suppression prevented audiences from seeing one of cinema's most honest examinations of American military violence. Soldier Blue's influence on revisionist westerns proves that buried films often contain the most important historical truths about American warfare. 2. Ulzana's Raid, 1972. Robert Aldrich's brutal Apache Western challenged romantic frontier mythology with realistic depiction of warfare's savage nature. The film's moral ambiguity and graphic violence made studios uncomfortable with its implications about American military history. Burt Lancaster stars as an aging scout leading inexperienced cavalry troops against Apache raiders led by Ulzana. The film refuses to romanticize either side, presenting warfare as mutually destructive savagery that corrupts all participants. Aldrich's direction emphasizes the psychological toll of frontier violence on both soldiers and civilians. The movie's refusal to provide clear heroes or villains challenged audiences expecting traditional Western entertainment. Universal limited theatrical distribution, worried about the film's graphic violence and morally complex portrayal of frontier conflict. The studio preferred Western films that supported traditional narratives about American expansion and military heroism. The film's honest examination of how warfare dehumanizes all participants and its refusal to provide comfortable moral conclusions proved too challenging for mainstream audiences. Ulzana's Raid remains one of cinema's most unflinching examinations of military violence and its lasting psychological consequences. 1. Hearts and Minds, 1974. Peter Davis's documentary exposé of American involvement in Vietnam proved so damaging to government and military credibility that officials attempted to prevent its distribution. The film's systematic deconstruction of war propaganda made it dangerous to established interests. The documentary combines archival footage, interviews with policymakers, and graphic combat imagery to expose how American leaders systematically deceived the public about Vietnam objectives and progress. The film reveals the racist attitudes underlying military strategy. Davis's editing creates devastating juxtapositions between official statements and battlefield reality, exposing the gap between propaganda and truth. The movie's inclusion of napalm attack footage and civilian casualties created unprecedented controversy. The film's eventual Academy Award victory proved that suppressed truth eventually emerges, but government resistance nearly prevented public access to crucial information about American foreign policy failures. Hearts and Minds remains the most powerful examination of how democratic governments manipulate public opinion to justify unjustifiable wars. These suppressed war films reveal uncomfortable truths that Hollywood preferred to keep buried. Each challenged official narratives and exposed the real human cost of military conflicts. Which hidden anti-war masterpiece will open your eyes? Subscribe for more censored cinema discoveries.